So today is about relationships. I once heard a story of a couple. They had been married for 50 years. Now I know that we've got a few people here at our church that have been married for 50 years, and the interesting thing is they didn't really get along that well, though. They struggled throughout many of those 50 years, and the kids pooled together. And for their 50th anniversary, the kids got them 4 sessions with a marriage and family therapist. So they went to the first one, and the couple was not communicating well, and the therapist was a male. He was really frustrated with this whole situation, and they just nitpicked. Who was right, who was wrong. They kept score, all that kind of stuff. And finally, the therapist was frustrated. He just gets up out of his chair, and he did something really unprofessional. He told the woman to stand up. The woman stood up, and he put his arms around her, and he just gave her a great big kiss on the lips. The woman, she was just freaking out. And so the therapist looked at the husband and he says, now she needs this at least 3 times a week. So the man thought about it for a second. He says, okay, I'll bring it around on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So some of us have ended up in the therapist's office before. Some of us should be in the therapist's office. Some of us will probably get to the place where it would be a good idea to go see the therapist in our relationships. So this is a human function that we have. Our relationships are not perfect. And here's why. I'm going to show you Romans chapter 3, verse 23, okay? This is a verse that many of us know. I want you to read it with me, all right? I'll read it slow. For everyone has sinned, for we all fall short of God's glorious standard. Okay, so everyone has sinned, and we all fall short of God's glorious standard. Now, in your marriage, in the parent-child relationships, in your friendships, in your work relationships, with your classmates, with your teammates, with your neighbors, whatever the relationship is, that relationship is going to be comprised of 2 imperfect people. So I'm going to give you some arithmetic. It's God's arithmetic here. Imperfect person plus imperfect person does not equal perfect relationship. It just doesn't. If you expect perfection in your marriage, with your kids, with your coworkers, your siblings, you're going to be disappointed. It's not going to happen. Now, you can have great. It can be wonderful. It can be life-giving, but we're not going to hit perfection. So here's what happens. When the imperfect appears, when the sin appears, whether it's intentional or unintentional, when the conflict appears, and it will, the first thing we get is misunderstanding. You can have 2 people that totally love each other. If they don't communicate perfectly, there's going to be misunderstanding. Now, has anyone in here ever been misunderstood before? Just a quick poll, been misunderstood, and it happens, right? So then misunderstanding means that our expectations aren't met. And when our expectations aren't met in a relationship for a long time, that's not a good thing. So when expectations aren't met, we get what? We get frustrated. Have y'all ever been frustrated at anybody before? Yeah, so this is normal stuff, right? But then the frustration goes to hurt. The hurt can turn into anger. And then all of a sudden, something that was once so simple and once so joyful and once so life-giving is now way too complex, and it just sucks the life out of us. Let's just say we can start practicing patience with other people. Let's say we can start practicing forgiveness with other people. Then what can happen is these relationships that were once simple and they turn complex, they can actually get really simple again. And they can be full of life, and they can be full of joy. They can be full of solidarity, companionship, all those beautiful things. So I want you to look at the screen. A healthy friendship, a healthy relationship, a healthy marriage is one where both parties can look at each other and think that they're the ones getting the good end of the deal. And I really hope that you got a few people in your life and you can look at them and you can actually say to them, in our relationship, I really feel like I'm the one getting the good end of the deal. And I can hope that they can look right back at you and say, no, it's not you, it's me. I'm the one that's being blessed. That's how, when it's simple, when things are working well, this works. Now, let's look at one more. A good relationship, a good friendship, a good marriage is one where two parties can become more together than they could have become separately by themselves. Like, that's how this works. Like, take us as a church. This is how we work here. We believe that we can become more together than we can become separately as individuals. We believe that we can do more good together than we can separately as individuals. It works that way in our small groups, our families, our marriages, our friendships. If you've been to a choir concert here at Millard West, it is an incredible, amazing thing, to see 120 high school kids up here singing together. So much better than listening to them all sing separately as individuals. Friendship, C.S. Lewis said this, friendship is really unnecessary. You don't need it to survive. But like philosophy and art, it has no survival value. Rather, it is one of the things that gives value to our survival. So to have your heart beat and your lungs breathe, you don't need friendship. But to add value to the life that God has given us, we need other people. We are not created to live in isolation. We are not created to live in solitude. We are created to live in community. So let's see. Today is the chili cook-off, right? So who here made chili today? Hopefully there's a lot of chili makers because there's a lot of people here and we're all hungry. So every year I make 3 types of chili. I make, this year was Benjamin's barbecue chili. So we found some apricot barbecue sauce and some bacon, and we mixed it all together. It's just delightful. I had it for breakfast this morning. It was really good. Then there's David's Dynamite chili. So I actually tested this one this morning. I was like a captain of a ship. If the ship's going down, I have to be the one going down first. And this stuff is hot. Like, we grew some ghost peppers this summer in the church garden and froze them, and I had the latex gloves, and I chopped them up last night, and I put it in there with some beef and stuff, and it's hot. And then there's the pastor's pretty good chili. It's just pretty good, but you can try it if you want. It's in the big pot. But think about this. Like, let's look at chili, okay? Now, what would it be like if I just served you some diced tomatoes? It'd be kind of boring, wouldn't it? Now I can serve you some beans. Now, some of you would probably eat the beans, but it wouldn't be that great. A bean by itself isn't much. So there's some cut up steak or some ground beef. That's pretty good by itself, but it's still not complete. So we have some onions. Now you could actually probably eat an onion by yourself, but it wouldn't be a very pleasant experience for you. There's some green pepper and there's some garlic, which you could eat by yourself, but it's not that great. But what happens when all these individual things get put together? When we leave this place in a little bit, we're going to go to the commons area and eat. And you're going to experience that we are better together than we are separately as individuals. But, what happens then when things get too complex? So what would happen if I took a great big thing of maple syrup and I dumped it in the pastor's pretty good chili? That would be kind of too complex, right? But you laugh, but you do this in your relationships. You do it all the time. We got 2 or 3 or 4 together, and it's beautiful and it's great. But then you start to make it too complex. And one way you can add maple syrup to your relationships is you can take someone for granted. One way to make your relationships really complex really quickly is to take another person for granted. Just stop saying thank you. Stop appreciating them, stop serving them, stop loving them, just totally take them for granted. Then all of a sudden, something that was simple and beautiful is now complex and not nearly as beautiful. What would happen if you put some peanut butter in this pastor's pretty good chili? That wouldn't work out either. And you put peanut butter in your relationships, it's called selfishness. It's no longer, okay, what can I do to serve this person to make them better? You're asking the question, what's in it for me? How can this relationship make me better? How can this person help me? How can they serve my needs? What if you put Fruit Loops in your chili? It might actually add a little interesting texture, but I'm not sure if it would do much else. But we put Fruit Loops in our relationships. We don't listen to other people. They're trying to communicate to us, and we're too busy thinking about what our response is going to be or how we can be right and they can be wrong. So we've taken this simple thing and we've made it so complex. Now, Jesus, he gives us a model for a friendship. Jesus says in John chapter 15, verse 14, he says, "You are my friend if you do what I command." You are my friends if you do what I command. Now, this verse is interesting. I want you to look at it. Jesus is not saying here that we have to do what he commands for us to be his friend. In the context that it's written, what Jesus is saying here is like, okay, this friendship stuff is going to take some work. It really is. It's not going to be easy, but I want you to know if you can pull it off, there's nothing that's going to be quite like it. So that's what Jesus means when he's saying here. And relationships, like every other area of our life, require evaluation and pruning and strengthening. So Jesus, let's look at this one. A friend, and I think it was Shakespeare that said this. A friend is one who knows you as you are, understands where you've been, accepts what you have become, and still gently allows you to grow. So here, this is like what a friend is. A friend will do all these things. Now, go back to verse 14. It says, "You're my friends if you do what I command." Now, in verse 12, right before this, Jesus has told us what he commands. Now, in John chapter 15, verse 12, Jesus says, "This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way that I have loved you." Love each other in the same way that I have loved you. So if you really wanted to be my friend, if you really wanted to be in a relationship with me, there's going to be something more important than the way you treat me. There really is. You can treat me like I'm the king of Norway. But unless you love my kids, the relationship is not going to be complete. The best thing you can do to love me is, go ask my son how his debate thing's going. Go ask my son how his basketball thing's going. Go ask how their day is. Encourage them. Love them. Jesus, he's saying the same things here. Like if you want to be in this relationship with God, if you want to be in this love each other. Treat each other well. Listen to each other. Accept each other. Forgive each other. Help each other grow. So what I did is, let's look at John chapter 15, verse 13, right in the middle of these two verses we've looked at. Jesus says, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. Now here, Jesus actually took this to the extreme. He gave his life for each of us. Like he died so that we can live. Now, I think what this means for all of us is Jesus is basically saying, okay, you're not going to be able to have a whole lot of friends. I'm God, and I only had 12 of them, and one of them didn't work out very well. You probably want to have a few less than that, but when you have go all in, everything. Give it everything you got. Whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 or maybe a few more, give it everything. There's no greater love than the one who gives everything. And everything means everything. Just give it all. Give your entire self to somebody else so that the two of you can become better together. So what I did is I looked at the life of Jesus. Jesus says in John chapter 15, verse 12, "Love each other in the same way that I have loved you." So what I did is I went and I looked at how Jesus loved people during his life to flush this out and to bring this into reality for all of us so that we can apply this to our lives together. The first thing that I found, and I just found this over and over and over and over again. I could have given you 20 different illustrations. The first thing that I found is Jesus loved us was this unconditional radical acceptance. So I want you to hear this. Jesus never ran into anybody that he didn't accept. And you're going to be no exception to that rule. Jesus accepts you. God accepts you exactly as you are. There's a woman one day. Let's go back even before then. There was a guy named Matthew. Matthew is the author of the most widely read book in human history, the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew wasn't always a disciple. He wasn't always this author. Matthew was a tax collector. So think of kind of like an IRS agent gone wrong. That was who Matthew was. And one day, Jesus went up to this guy, he's a criminal, he's a thug. And Jesus says, hey, Matthew, I want you to come and follow me. I accept you. I know you've messed up in the past, but come with me. Together, me and you are going to change the world. It was acceptance. There was two fishermen, James and John. Fishermen, it wasn't like, it wasn't a high-paying gig. It wasn't a well-respected gig. You ever seen like The Deadliest Catch before? It's like a risky job, and you're out there trying to catch a few fish and make a few bucks. And Jesus says, I want you guys to put down your nets. I accept you for who you are. I don't care what you do. Come with me, and we're going to change the world. Like this radical acceptance. He didn't care. Later in ministry, Matthew and James and John would have seen this. So there's a woman who was caught in deep sin. All these Pharisees were ready to basically kill her. So here's what happens when relationships get complex and things go wrong. Now I want you to get this right. This woman's been caught in sin. These guys are ready to throw stones at her and kill her. Now here's what we find here. We find, like, with the guys ready to throw the rocks, like guilt, or resentment, bitterness, anger. Like, we're finding that in them when the relationships go wrong. And then in the woman, it's like total fear and humiliation. Okay, fear, humiliation, resentment, bitterness, anger is not God's plan for our relationships. So Jesus, he had to step in on this one, and he's like, oh, no, you guys put those rocks down. This woman messed up, but so is everyone else, including you. Now put your rocks down and, get out of here. And then looked at the woman. He says, okay, I accept you. I love you. It's radical good news. It's good news for me. I don't know about you. It's good news for me that you're accepted. So what we get to do is we get to love others like Jesus loves us. We get to accept people. Now, that acceptance is only the first part of grace. So grace cannot stop there. Grace is not just letting somebody off the hook. Grace is not enabling a self-destructive behavior. Grace is taking the next step and helping people grow to where God wants them to be. So think of it like this. God accepts us exactly as we are, exactly where we are, but God loves us so much that he is not going to leave us in that place, but he is going to move us to where he wants us to go. So Jesus says, when you love other people, love them like I have loved you. So let's look at the woman. Jesus said, okay, you guys get out of here, put the rocks down. Okay, woman, you're accepted. It wasn't period, it was comma. You're accepted, but now go and sin no more. Go and sin no more. So when I was a youth minister in Marietta, Georgia, this would have been back in 1998, this event happened. I had a guy who was a baseball player at Kennesaw State University. He was like a fifth-year senior, 22, 23-ish. He grew up in the church. He was kind of well-known around the area. Everyone absolutely loved him. And when he could possibly do it, which was almost every Sunday, he taught the Sunday school boys. He taught the boys' high school Sunday school class. And these kids just loved this guy. His brother was in the class, and he was just one of those charismatic, his name was Billy, like everyone in the South named Billy, So what happened was Billy actually got arrested. He was arrested for drinking and driving. We all heard about it. The star baseball player for the good baseball team gets arrested. We all heard about it. And he came into my office. I didn't work every day. I think I worked like Monday, Thursday, and Friday or something like that. And it happened late in the weekend, and he came into my office. It was like on the Thursday or Friday. And he gave me his resignation letter that he was going to, quit teaching the Sunday school class. So you know what I did with the resignation letter? I just wadded it up and I threw it away. I said, you're not done. So you're not done teaching this class. These boys love you. I said, what we're going to do is we're going to teach a class together this Sunday, all right? And then after that, you're back on your own. So me and him went into the class. I'd talked to a lot of the parents at this point, and We went to the class, and I said, hey, you guys have heard what's going on here. We're going to talk about it, your high school kids. And Billy, he said, hey, man, I drank. Sometimes I drink too much. And, I got behind the wheel. I put my life at risk. I put other people's life at risk. The kids talked about it a little bit, and I said, you know what, church, we're not about the law. We're about grace. We're not about perfection. We're about second chances. Now, Billy's a good guy. He's a great guy. He's going to be your Sunday school teacher. I want you to learn from his mistakes. I want you to learn from the great person that he is. Can you do that? And all the kids, they just went up there, and one by one, and they said, Billy, we accept you. We accept you. Now, after church got over that day, Billy came up to me and said, Craig, that was amazing. I mean, these kids accept me. You're giving me a second chance. They're giving me a second chance. And I was like, Billy, this is the first part of grace. Now you're going to get the second part of grace. I said, Billy, I want to introduce you to Billy. Seriously, it was the case. Billy was our church maintenance facility guy. I said, Billy, Billy number one. Billy number two, I didn't say that, but I said, Billy's he's been arrested for drunk driving twice. It was like 15 years ago, but alcohol ruined his marriage. Ruined it. It's over now. Alcohol has cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he's going to teach you things that nobody else can. I want you to meet with him like once a week. Can you do that? And he goes, yeah, I can do it, yeah. It was really cool, like the next 2 years to see the church custodian and this college baseball player hanging out every chance they got. Grace doesn't just say you're off the hook. Grace says, okay, I'm going to go along with you, and I'm going to help you grow. That's what happens. Now, in addition to acceptance and growth, what I see with Jesus is just this patience. As you just read through the Gospels, you just see patience everywhere. So you had these 12 disciples, so there ended up being 11 of them. But you had these 12 disciples, and these guys just did not get it. I mean, Jesus preached some of these amazing sermons, and Jesus, he healed people, and they saw these miracles. I mean, there's a guy, Lazarus was raised from the dead. There was blind people who could see. There was a person that was told up to get out of their wheelchair and start walking, and the person walked. They saw all these things, and time after time, they just didn't get it. I remember one time Jesus climbed a mountain, and James and John and Peter climbed up the mountain with him, and they were arguing about who was the closest to Jesus. And Jesus, he just had to scratch his head and say, you guys don't get it. We're here worshiping God, and you're worried about who's first in line. But you know what? Jesus, he never, ever gave up on them. This is patience personified. At the end of his life, Jesus still had these 12 people with him. He didn't give up on them. He says, friends, this is my body that is given for you. When you eat this, remember me. And I can't help think, but Jesus was saying, I want you to remember all those times that I was patient with you. All those times it would have been so easy to give up. All those times it would have been so easy to quit. I want you to remember that, and I want you to go and be that to somebody else. When I was in seminary at Emory, we all have to take classes, and that's the whole point of seminary is classes. Chapels too, I guess. But obviously we take preaching classes, and I had never spoken in public before. I was totally so nervous the first time I ever spoke. So most preaching classes, they'll have 20 students, and you'll break into 3 small groups. And so my first one, the content, I had it all written out. I was confident it was a good message. But again, I was so nervous. So I got up, and my 6 or 7 classmates were there, and I watched the tape of it, and it was the most painful thing I've ever seen in my life. I rocked back and forth, and I didn't look up the whole time, and I read really fast, and people were staring at me. I thought my zipper must have been down the whole time. I don't know what was going on. And so then the professor, his name was Bob. He was actually the leader of my small group, and he says, Craig, you're gonna have to do this 4 more times. is there any way that I can work with you on the next one? Like, you write it down and like me and you can go over it together and you can get comfortable with it. And I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. You do that for me. And so we did it. And he says, Craig, it's Tuesday. It's like your sermon's next Tuesday. Can you stay after class on Thursday and like just give me your sermon, just me and you two friends? I'm like, yeah, that'd be really, really cool. So, the second sermon came up, and it wasn't a whole lot better. I wasn't swaying quite as much and reading quite as fast, but after 4 or 5 times, I became at least somewhat competent, where I wasn't a complete embarrassment. But after it was done, I went up to the professor, and I was like, Professor, you can't like do this for everybody. There's 20 students in your class. I know you teach other classes that have like 20 or 30 students. You got papers to write and stuff to, whatever, and get tenure and all that sort of stuff. And he says, no, Craig, I just do it for the people who really need it, and you needed it. He says, when you got up there, you're one of the worst I've ever heard. And but then he looked at me and he says, but Craig, I really believe that someday maybe you're going to be one of the best I've ever heard. And I certainly haven't made it that far yet. But this man was totally patient with me. Like, he didn't have to do this. This did not help him get tenure. This did not help his performance evaluation. This didn't help him get published in Christianity Today. This was a man showing patience to another person. And this is what it can look like. In your relationships, your patience is going to be tested almost every day. We can respond with impatience or with patience, respond with patience. Now the last one, and this one's not going to surprise you at all. We've looked at God's acceptance of us. We've looked that God is going to take us to where God wants us to go, and we can do that with others. We've looked at patience. And the last one is I looked at Jesus. It's forgiveness. As Jesus says, love other people, like he did this all the time. Like he can't like go from like Matthew chapter 3 to Matthew chapter 28 and not see this forgiveness. I think the thing with Jesus was, I see this most with Peter. Have you guys noticed, and you've noticed this, you've experienced this in your own life, like the people that have the potential and the capacity to hurt you the most are the people that you love the most. It's like this cruel irony of life. The one that we love the most is also the one that can hurt us the most. Like if it's your first time here and you come up to me afterward and you say, Craig, that was probably like the worst sermon I've ever heard, I would probably say something like, okay, well, go have some of David's Dynamite chili and thank you for your feedback. And I'm going to sleep just as well tonight as I did last night. Now, if someone who's been coming here for like 8 years and we're friends, and you come up to me and say something like, Craig, hate to break the news to you, but your preaching has gone downhill. I mean, if you thought you were bad in seminary, like watch a YouTube video of this one. Like, it's awful. I'm going to some other church. Now, I'd say to them, go eat some of David's Dynamite chili. Take the whole bowl home if you want, and keep the crock pot. But that one would hurt. It would, wouldn't it? Because I'm in a relationship with this person. And when Peter hurt Jesus, this is the person that could probably hurt Jesus the most. Now, this actually happened a number of times. So what I'm going to tell you is at the end of Jesus' life. So Jesus says, Peter, you're probably going to give up on me. And Peter says, no, there is no way, Jesus. There is absolutely no way that I'm ever going to deny you. So Jesus was carrying the cross up the hill. And this little girl goes and asks Peter, like, hey, I saw you with that guy. You're his friend. And Peter's like, no. I look like a lot of people. I don't know that guy. Never seen him before. Then someone else goes up to Peter, and as Jesus gets closer to the top of the hill, they say, hey, you're one of Jesus' 12 followers, right? You're Peter. And Peter goes, no, I don't know the guy. And then a guy comes up to Peter and says, hey, you and that guy, like, you're friends, right? And Peter's like, no. I've seen him around. I don't know who he is. Jesus heard that, And he looked over at Peter. When Jesus and Peter locked eyes, all of a sudden a simple relationship got really complex. Jesus was hurt at the deepest part of his persona. So what do you think Jesus did to Peter? Did he hold that grudge and die knowing that him and Peter were not right? No, what Jesus did is what he did with everybody else who hurt him. He ended up forgiving Peter. Now, forgiveness is not for the faint of heart. It's not for the weak. You got to be incredibly strong to do this one. You know, when it came time in Acts chapter 2, where the church had started and God gives the world the Holy Spirit, they needed a preacher. And guess who Jesus picked to preach that sermon? The one who denied him 3 times. It was Peter. Jesus says, you know, Peter, when you get up in front of those people, it's like this. You get to preach about the grace you've experienced. You know, you can speak of forgiveness because now you know about it. You know, I think about this in our life, like, and I want to be really clear that, like, forgiveness doesn't mean that you forget the offense. It doesn't mean that things are all perfect like they once were. You know, that may or may not be the case. You know, basically, forgiveness is saying, okay, I care too much about me, and I care too much about you to allow our imperfection to ruin our future. You know, that's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is, it can be sometimes like, okay, you've hurt me once. That was like lousy. And I'm not going to keep holding on to this anger, this bitterness, this resentment. I'm not going to keep holding on to that because I'm not going to let you continue to hurt me. So I'm therefore going to forgive you. You can receive this as grace. I can't ultimately, you know, determine what you do with this forgiveness, but I'm offering it to you. Now, as we close, I want you to think about, you know, all these things. Like, is there someone out there that you're just not accepting for some reason? You know, is there someone in your life that you're not trying to take or trying to travel with from point A to point B because you know that point B is a lot better place than point A? You know, is there someone in your life that you can really practice patience with? Like you say, okay, I realize this person's imperfect. I realize they're on the journey from point A to point B, and I'm gonna support them. I'm gonna be patient. I'm gonna, you know, take this journey with them. And I think for a lot of us, we're gonna have to think about that person that, you know, maybe when I started talking about forgiveness, you got this little knot in the bottom of your stomach because someone really messed you up at one time, and that forgiveness hasn't quite happened yet, and you're still in the early parts of that journey. But it's a journey worth taking. It really is. Jesus says when you love other people like I've loved them, you've really discovered what life is about. So let's go to God and let us pray.